Welcome to That Geek, the only show in the world that puts you face to face with top world experts in real time. In order to join us, all you have to do is bum ba da bum. Hold on a second, I'll let you know. Is join us right here on thatgeek.com/live. We are talking podcasting, growing your podcasting from zero to over 30 million downloads and views. So while we're running the promo, come on here. I'm thatgeek.com/live. If you're watching us online, the link is right above the video that you're watching. So hop on in and we're waiting for you. So, welcome to That Geek Show, the only show in the world, except for my clients, that puts you face to face with world experts in real time, where you can come in, ask your questions, get real advice about your own business, your relationship, your life, your health, your nutrition. And today we are talking about podcasting. Before I forget, my name is Ifat Cohen and I am your host. And because I keep forgetting to say my name and then people don't know how to pronounce it, and then it's fantastically amazing what happens. So, in podcasting, as it is in marketing, as it is in live videos and growing any type of business, there's no one size fits all solution, right? There's no magic pill. If someone is selling it to you, don't buy it. There are over 2 million podcasts out there, but today, but about 750,000 that have been published in the last 90 days. 750,000 new podcasts in the last 90 days. Why? Because someone said, hey, you need to start a podcast. But then, how do you make it to grow? How do you make people come and listen to you? How do you engage with them? How do you even start a conversation and keep it interesting? That's what we're talking about today with my amazing guest, Marion Abrams. Hey, Marion, let me unmute you. How are you, my friend?
I'm great. Wow, what an introduction. That was so energetic, and I like the graphics. This is, I feel like there's a high bar to meet today. I'm excited.
It's all good. You are fantastic. People don't even know everything about you, like all the stuff that you did on TV and how you
Yeah.
grew the business and all these amazing things. So you were on project on PBS, NBC, ABC, ESPN, HDTV, Spike TV. I don't even know what that is. The History Channel. You earned an Emmy nomination. You directed a film. I saw some of your editing work, which is amazing, about the Spartan race. That was great. I shared it with everybody, just so you know. If you guys don't know what I'm talking about, it's amazing. Marion, follow the guy, right? Was
Oh, Chris Davis. Yeah.
yeah,
Wow. That we did 20 weeks of episodes way back before webisodes were a thing.
which is, do you want to share that story just a little bit? Because it's an amazing transformational story. And when I watched it, I was thinking, wow, the power of community, right? The power of being surrounded by people who are only there to support you in your dreams. I know this is not about the podcasting, but it's so amazing. I'm going to put it in the notes, but share just a little bit about that. Like, how did that happen?
Yeah, and I'll say, so yes, 100% the power of community, the power of support, the power of that, but also the power of people holding you accountable,
Yeah.
of people making you do hard things, and the reality that there are no shortcuts, there's no magic pill. So this guy, Chris Davis, I believe he was over 600 pounds.
Right.
And the way that the Spartan founder met him was that he had started to lose a little weight. He'd had gastric bypass. He'd lost, maybe 100 pounds or so. And it was still hard for him to even walk around. And so he would sign up for 5K races and he would walk them. And a colleague of him said, "Hey, are you doing the Spartan race?" And he thought that it was a 5K that was in Spartan, Georgia. And so he said, "Sure, I'll do that." He didn't know it was the obstacle race. But when he got there, he had the drive that he finished the race. He had to walk the whole course. He was literally the last one off the course that night. He had to be helped to his car. He barely could step over a small, log that was a few inches high. He was stumbling. And it got the attention of the whole Spartan world. And he was invited by the founder to come up and live at his farm and change his life. And over that period of time, this is a guy who literally could not walk up a hill, ended up doing one of the most intense Spartan races, 16 miles up and down mountains, climbing over things. He lost over 100 pounds in the 20 weeks he was there. Really unbelievable. And you can watch over 20 weeks every week. You can see there's no bullshit here. But, the reality is this is a guy, and this is, not to get off topic onto the health stuff, but this is a guy who would go to McDonald's to the drive-through window and he would get, I forget how many Egg McMuffins, like 4 or 5 of them, and a liter of soda. And he would eat all that and then go to another drive-through because he was embarrassed that he was having that much and take the same order again. And yet, when he came to Vermont to change his life, and he was told, "You are going to eat for the first week only raw fruits and vegetables," he kept saying, "Well, don't I need to check with my doctor? That seems dangerous."
I know. Where's all the, where's the energy?
Yeah, right. Yeah. An amazing story. And listen, that is not an easy thing to change your life that way. That takes a lot of commitment.
Yeah, and so what's fascinated me about that is, everybody starts diet, everybody starts a business, everybody starts a new job, right? Like, hey, I'll just watch this video and
Everybody starts a podcast.
everybody starts a podcast, right? Everybody goes live, everybody does all these things. But it's in the little things, right? And we all think like, come on, I see this online every day. All I need is to start a podcast and that's it. High ticket clients are coming in, calling me, wanting to hire me, right? And you start doing this and 4 weeks go by, 6 weeks go by, 8 weeks goes by, right? 90 days go by, and you're like, why isn't my phone ringing? And what was amazing to me about the journey that he was going through and the way that you did that was amazing. It was like week 1, week 2, week 3, right? And you see the progressive change, but you go like, dude, I'm like, how many is 20 weeks? Right? Because I'm like, would I stick around for 20 weeks to see this? And even at the
Yeah.
end, and he had the oxygen mask on. He was sleeping with oxygen mask and
Yeah.
he was
Yeah.
walking everything. And I think, I'm watching this and I'm like, man, if the support wasn't there, if the right guidance wasn't there, if the environment wasn't right, who's going to stick it out for like more than, 2, 3 weeks?
And
Right.
I can tell you it was very close. I mean, there are many times that he came very close to leaving.
Yeah, because it's not easy, right? And how many times we start on a journey and we fall for that magic pill.
Yes.
Do a podcast, right? Your life will be fantastic after that, right? That's all you need, right? And then someone like you who's a consultant comes in and goes like, wait a second, right? Let's ask the real questions. What is it for? Who's the audience? How are you doing?
Exactly.
So when you start
Yes.
working with your clients, like the Spartan, how you grew their show from 0 to 30 million, what are the first things that go into like, okay, we're gonna do this thing, let's do it right. How do we get into that?
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, most of the clients I work with, everybody starts in a different place. And that's why the one-on-one kind of no blueprint thing works, because we're all in a different place. We all have a different message. But I do have a process, and there's 5 P's of podcasting. And if
Mm-hmm.
you miss these, you will miss in your podcast. And the first one is purpose, right? So why do you want to start a podcast?
Right.
And this isn't the why, like Simon Sinek's why. This is not, I want to clean the plastics from the oceans, or I want to change the world with this message. This is the purpose in a practical sense. So are you trying to drive traffic to your website? you want to sell your book? Do you want to sell courses? Do you want to just have this as a form of self-expression because this is something you love to do? It's your hobby. Is there a conversation that you feel isn't happening in the public sphere that needs to happen? Are there people you want to meet, your guests? There are a lot of different reasons, but the first thing is you take that first P, the purpose, and I help clients really dig in and understand, and maybe there's multiple, and maybe they change over time. But if you don't understand what the purpose is in the beginning, there's no way to measure your success. And it's inevitable that you're going to become disheartened because there's no way to progress. There's no way to measure it. There's no way to know if you're succeeding.
Right. And you know what's fascinating is actually, let me ask you this because I don't know. I'm assuming that everybody's coming into podcasting to just make money because they saw something online that said, "Hey, this is the new way to make money." So they're just going into like, okay, do you think
So
it's the
there
new
is that.
webinar? The new is that right? Is that
Yes. So there's a lot of that. There's a couple different kind of subcultures in the world of podcasting. And there are definitely the people that fell for those ads that are just break my heart, that are out there saying like it's easy, make a killing, monetize on day one. There's a lot of unscrupulous people selling bullshit, frankly. I mean, so one piece of information that's important to know, based on data from one of the largest hosting platforms, and I can talk about what that means, a hosting platform, but it means that they're kind of one of the largest publishers of podcasts. If you have 125 downloads per episode, you're doing better than 50% of all podcasts out there. So,
important? Important. Wait,
people who
wait. This
talk
is
about,
super important,
yes,
right? Like this one data, super important, guys.
yeah, so important.
125, not 1,000, not 10,000,
Right.
not 5,000, 125, which is it's a double-edged sword because you go like, oh, 125, but then it's like, how hard is it to get 125 that 50% of the people are not doing it?
Yeah, exactly. And especially if you're thinking about monetizing fast and you think about something like a CPM where you're getting, $20 per thousand downloads, it's pretty hard to make money that way.
Yeah. Yeah. And so if you guys are coming into podcasting thinking this is a easy ride to the top, sure. It took Joe Rogan with his famous thing, I think like 8 years, 8 or 10 years to become the Joe Rogan show where everybody wants to be the Joe, but he did it years before it
Yeah.
was,
And
right?
he was a stand-up comedian. He was a professional entertainer. I mean, he had a whole life behind what he was doing.
Yeah, and still it took years. So the first myth that we want to blast here is
Yes.
that podcasting is great, but there has to be a purpose behind it. And the purpose
Right.
is unique to you. And whatever it is that you decide it is for you, that's the right purpose for you. There's no right and wrong, right? But you have to start with that. And then the second
Yeah,
piece,
exactly. Sorry. Yeah, exactly. Because you can't measure your success. And you had asked about the people who get into it for the get. The other way that people come in is they think, I just have this message I believe in, and I'm going to put it out there, and things will just sort of happen.
right?
And they are comfortable doing promotion. They're not really comfortable with the whole money part. And they also sabotage themselves because, you know, they don't get enough listeners. They don't get their message out in the way that they should. So no matter kind of where you're coming from, you still need to go through this process.
So that is super interesting what you just said. Super super interesting. Because what you just said is that if you don't know how to market and get the word out that you do have a podcast, right? There are 2 million podcasts out there right now. 750,000 in the last 90 days. If you just start yours and you don't tell anyone, they will never know. And your message will not be
Right.
heard and you won't get listeners because you forgot one integral part about this whole thing, which is marketing. So
Yeah.
purpose is the first one. Let people
Yes.
know the second one, right?
Well, so the next, right. So that is one of them. It's usually it's number five is actually promote. But the
Yeah.
second P is point of view. And the reason that point of view, it's all integrated, right? All of it meshes together and relates. But the reason point of view matters is if you think about it this way, say you want to start a crocheting podcast, right? And there maybe are 50 podcasts about crocheting. But what's different about yours? Yours will be different because you have a unique personality, point of view, all of that. If you go out there and you try to do a podcast just like everybody else,
Hmm.
the best you can possibly be is second best,
Right.
right? If you can really hone in and understand what's your unique take and personality and point of view on the subject, then you become a category of one. And then you become something that people want to share about. Then there's a reason for people to say, you've got to listen to Ifat's show because she does things the way nobody else does. They're not going to say you've got to listen to Ifat's show because she's almost as good as somebody else.
Right. She's the Brene Brown of marketing. Why do I need to listen to her? Let me listen to Brene Brown. Um,
Exactly.
right. But you just touch on like a really important point, which I think a lot of people are missing when they're coming in. And it's when someone watches all the marketing online, right? And they're going like, here's the formula for blah, right? In following the formula for blah, you lose your voice, right?
Yes.
Because it's not your formula. It's like, okay, let me do what they do so I can get their results, and you're not them, so you're not getting the same results. So how
I
do you
love you. Yeah, I love you talked about that on my podcast, and it really was such a great insight that I hadn't thought of. That we think about trust, and you think about how these sort of fly by night bullshit people, they give this bad advice, how they destroy trust in themselves or the industry. But what you pointed out, which is so much more important, is that they destroy the trust of the listeners, because I listen to bad advice and I try to implement it and it doesn't work, and I think there's something wrong with me.
yeah.
Lose these voices that are important that way.
Yeah, it and it breaks my heart. We've all been through that journey. And then you have to decide, I'm going to do it my way, or I'm going to find someone that I trust, right? That will not tell me the formula, but will bring the best in me. And
Yes.
so, right? And so when you work
I
out with
trust everything.
completely, right? Like there's a good coach that will raise you up and a coach that will smash you, kill your confidence. And I've been through both. So if you want stories, I got them. But when someone comes to you and they go like, but what should I talk about? And how should I talk about this? And, they're not really sure about their voice. What's the advice of like, okay, this is how it's okay for you to show up as who you are?
Yeah, so there's a whole process, and a lot of it is asking questions.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's like you've heard that expression, it's hard to read the label when you're inside the bottle.
Yeah.
It's hard to see what's your special thing. But I think once you understand the purpose, you can come at it kind of from multiple directions, and that can be helpful. So if you're coming at it from a practical purpose, then you start to think about it can be overwhelming when you just are going out of the blue and saying, like, who am I? What's essentially important about me? That's overwhelming.
Yeah.
But when you're saying, like, okay, I have this new book that I wrote about how to garden. And so I want to start a podcast. How do I start a podcast that's going to speak to those right people that are going to want to buy my book? And then you start to really look at kind of coming at it from multiple angles. Who are the people who are going to buy the book? What is it that they want to hear? And how am I in a unique position to speak to that? So you put all those pieces together to find your voice. I did a video the other day, and I was talking about pottery. I'm looking around because I don't have the cup, but I'm a beginner in a pottery class. And so I started to make a cup. And there's this idea that I had, which was when you make a cup in a pottery class, especially mine, where it's like kind of bumpy and crooked, on the one hand, it's mine, it's me, it's a piece of art, right? It's a creative expression. I picked the color, I picked the shape, I made it with my hands. But on the other hand, this serves a practical purpose. I
Right.
want to drink from it. It holds my coffee. It has to feel good, and the lip of it can't spill the coffee down my shirt. So when you can bring together that creative voice and personal expression with the purpose, it kind of helps you to build something that works.
Yeah, and I love the examples that you're sharing because I would never think of like gardening over there, but they're so applicable, right? Like it's not always marketing and business and money and finances. So the cup is so interesting because when you just start, it doesn't look like a cup, right? It
Right.
kind of like I remember doing pottery one time because I'm like, come on, obviously I'm not good at this. But it comes with practice, right? And looking back at my old videos of my old live stream, I'm like, what was I thinking, right? Like I had a hat period, I had a shirt period, like stuff that I'm like, oh my God. Now it's so much more polished and, clean. I have transitions and everything works fine. That wasn't there 3 years ago. So when people start a podcast, right, we always see the end result of other people and we go like, I'm not good enough because I need to
I love
start
this
with
because you're
this.
skipping ahead. There's a third P, but the fourth P
Yeah.
is practice. And this is the thing that people, that's number four in the P's. We skipped three, but we'll get there. But the fourth P is practice. And this is something that I think I used to feel this way about both pottery and being on camera. And that is, you see people who are good at it and you think they're just the kind of people that are good at it.
Right.
No, I literally was in my pottery class yesterday and there was a new woman who joined and she started and she said, I'm just not the kind of person that can do pottery. I can't center the clay on the wheel. And that's what I thought. When I started, I thought, I'm just not that kind of person.
Right.
I'm not the kind of person that's good on camera. But the truth is, it's a skill. And after 30 years of helping other people be good on camera, I finally turned it around on myself and I realized, oh, I just need to practice. I need to show up. I need some coaching. I need to take that analysis, analytical look and not take it personally, but just say, what can I improve? What am I doing well? How can I keep doing it, change it, do it better, and push through? There's an author, Stephen Pressfield. Are you familiar with him?
I am not.
He's a great author. He wrote a book called The War of Art. But one of the things he talks about is what he calls turning pro. And basically, the idea is that any creative thing that you do, there's going to be this almost intangible force he calls resistance.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if you're a writer and you sit down at a blank piece of paper, it is emanating this resistance. It's saying, like, it doesn't want you to write, you know? And it's the same when you get on camera and you have these voices that are like, who cares? Nobody wants to listen. I look like an idiot, you know, all those voices. But when you're a pro, when you turn pro, when you take it seriously and look at it like a professional, you don't listen to those voices. You hear them and then you just push past them. Because just like, you know, the milkman who has to deliver the milk in the morning has to get up and take those bottles to every house, even if it's raining or cold or he doesn't feel like it, being a pro on camera is the same thing.
Right.
You have to show up and do it even when you don't feel like it.
And there's a beauty in podcasting that doesn't exist in live streaming right now, right? So right now, if I mess up publicly, I mess up gloriously in front of everybody, right? And that is scary to a lot of people. What if I say the wrong thing? What if I, like when we were on the podcast, right? My
Yes.
program is from seen to sold out, and then you say it better, right? But if I, and a lot of people are kind of like mess up. I don't want to do lives. I don't want to do lives. And the fear of like who's coming in, how many people see me, nobody cares, how
Right.
many people go, right?
Right.
In podcast, completely different, right? You can record it
Yeah.
a billion times and it's totally fine, and then you edit and you sound just as good. So, what goes into that, right? Like, so we had the purpose, the number
Point
two,
of view. Number three is process.
process.
And it is the process is really in a lot of ways the least difficult and the least interesting, but it's what everybody gets hung up on.
Yeah.
And the process is all those things that you need to do, like, and they matter, but they're not as important. You know, what microphone are you using? Do you hire an editor or do it yourself? How big is your team? How do you choose your guests? What software are you using? All those kinds of things, that's your process. And here's the way I describe it to people. This is your pen, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're a writer, you do need a pen. You can't write without a pen.
Right.
But what makes you a great writer is not what kind of pen you have.
Right.
And that's the way your microphone is. Yes, you've got to have a good microphone. You've got to have your tech in place. But that's not essentially what makes you a great podcaster. What makes you a great podcaster is having a good, clear message, having a promise that you keep to your audience, that every time they come back, they know that promise will be fulfilled and you serve a purpose to them. And that purpose might be entertainment or comedy or information, whatever that is, but know that purpose and serve that purpose and make that promise and keep that promise.
I love that. And that kind of goes into the next one of how, if you decide to do a podcast like what we're doing right now, have a conversation, interview people, not just do it on your own, how do you make it so it's not boring?
Yeah, yeah. So there's a couple of recommendations I have for being a great interviewer. And number one is the way you prepare.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have this friend, he's a retired military colonel. And he said to me, it's not the plan, it's the planning. And so what he was saying was in a military scenario, you would prepare a very detailed plan. And you would go through and you would have your worst case scenario, your plan B, plan C. If this happens, then that happens, all your contingencies. But then, no matter how thoroughly you plan, when you get into the situation, life is different and
Right.
you don't using the plan. But because you've done the planning, you're ready for the situation. And so I think about planning for an interview that way. So the first thing you want to do is before you talk to any guest, you want to understand essentially what's the one thing of value that this guest can provide to your audience. And once you know what that essential thing is, again, whether that's an emotionally compelling story or a piece of information or insight or motivation, whatever that is, once you know what that is, then you write your questions around that. And you could write 50, 100, however many questions you want, but you're not going to bring the questions. That's the planning, right, that you're doing. And then you put those aside. And that allows you to really be present and focused and in the moment and engaging directly, like you are with me, with your guest in the interview, but still being able to kind of step back and make sure you're providing value. Because there's this thing that people say, they say, oh, a great host is someone who follows their curiosity. And yes, that's part of it. But, maybe I just painted my house or I'm about to paint my house. And so did you. And I'm really curious about like how many coats you use and what kind of brush. That's my natural curiosity, but that's not the promise we've made to the audience, right? It's not interesting to them. So yeah, follow your curiosity, but within those ground rules, within those rails that you've set up with that essential why that starts the conversation.
Yeah, and one of the things that is the hardest thing for me to communicate when I am talking, when I'm training how to get over your fear of camera and how to do lives and how to do all that stuff is the art of conversation. And I always say, like, and you take it even if for life, like if I'm like, engage in social, and like, they're like, what's engaging? And I'm like, what do you mean? Go comment and, engage. And they're like, but what do I say? And to me, it's kind of weird because if you are passionate and curious about the topic and the people that are in the topic, you'll have something to say, right? Like you'll have something to add. You have a question to ask. You're like, you and I are complete geeks. And so you and I can like geek out over software and tech and community and how you do this, right? And topics and all that for hours. And if I saw, when I'm watching your stuff online, it's not like, what am I going to ask Marianne? That's going to be interesting. I'm like, no, we're just going to come in. The conversation will be fantastic because I'm curious. I'm interested. We're
Yeah.
jamming on the same thing. And I think the challenge is when people go like, I can't engage, is because you're going probably to people who don't share your interest, or you're not curious about what they're doing, or you feel like there's a format that you have to follow and you get stuck with like, what, question number 5 and then ask question number 5.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, I think I hate to keep referencing like videos that I did, but I just thinking about it. I did a video today that I think will be kind of unpopular because I said if you're coming to me or to anyone and your question about your podcast is what should we talk about, you're not ready to start a podcast.
Right.
And if your question is what kind of guest should I have on the show, you are not ready to start, right? Because as you just said, if you don't have something that you want to know, that you want your audience to know, then you need to go back and do some deliberate work, to get ready.
Totally. Um, and you know what? It's very interesting because sometimes, like, people start blogging. They start blogging because they want to get something out, right? Um,
Mhm.
and you said that at the beginning. You said that's totally fine. If that's your purpose to do a podcast just for your own emotional release, do that, right? But then you know that the
Yeah,
metrics are not going to be downloads and they're not going to be sales, and it's just going to be for your emotional, which is fine, right?
right.
But you have
Yes.
to get there, right? And so when people watch or the marketing online on podcasting, and they get the idea of like, this is the one vehicle for my happily ever after, and then they're very stressed, right? Because like, oh, I'm not up to par, I'm not going fast enough, I'm not doing all these things, and then they come to you and you go like, okay, slow down, let's find out, why do you want to do a podcast, right? Do you ever tell
Yes, right.
people like podcasting is not the right route for whatever you want to achieve, or is it always the right route, but there are some stipulations?
So, I mean, I'm sure I haven't encountered yet somebody who I said, like, don't do a podcast, right? But I've said, don't start yet,
Hmm.
or I've said, reassess. Usually, I really like to work with people, right? And so when you hire someone, no matter who they are, to help you with a creative process, you are always the ultimate arbiter of any creative decision. They can give you guidance and you should listen to that guidance. But ultimately, if you're paying for someone's services, whether that's your editor, or your consultant, your coach, your writer, you get to decide. You get the ultimate decision.
Right.
So I try to work with people to give them guidance where they want to go at the pace that they want to go. And so some people, it might take a long time to make those changes, and some people are ready to just make the changes. But the thing is, once you know where you want to go, then you start to build your plan backwards
Right.
from there. Because if you're doing, I'm trying to think of an example. If you're doing a podcast where you make it all about the guest and you're trying to establish yourself as an expert, maybe you need to do some solo episodes. There's always ways that we can reassess and change how you do things. And I wanted to just touch back on that getting comfortable on camera thing, because this is something I've worked with people with a lot. And I think the number one thing that I can't emphasize enough, the more professional the people that I work with are, in terms of like the more polished, the more used to being on camera, literally all the broadcasters that were on television in the old days when it was, TV versus the internet, they do multiple takes. They expect to do multiple takes. They don't expect to get it right the first time, but we put that weight on ourselves. We think that we should be charismatic, we should have it memorized, we should know just what we're going to say the first time. And live, you put a lot of pressure on yourself. But when you're recording a podcast, you can have notes because you're not doing a visual format, and you can practice. That's one of the 5 P's. You've got to practice. If you don't practice, why would you be good at it? Why would you think you'd be great at it? It's actually kind of a disrespect to all the professionals out there to think that you don't have to do any work to be good at it.
That's true. That is very true. Um, so let me ask you about this new. It's not really new because I know people who have done it before, and before I noticed it probably, and now it seems to pop up a lot. One of the things that I teach in From Scene to Sold Out, from Scene to Sold Out, is what happens in Vegas doesn't stay in Vegas. Meaning, like all these amazing conversations that you're having with your prospects in real time. Usually, they happen in silo, on the phone, in a Zoom meeting, right around the dinner table, in the halls of a live event or something. Most of the world doesn't see you shine and be at your best because that stuff happens one on one, kind of like in the corner. And what I'm saying is like, no, open this conversation and let's do that where people can see you deliver these jackpot moments in real time. And then they go like, oh, that person seems to be really awesome. Let me go talk to them. The first person I know that did that with podcasting was
Jackson?
Dean Jackson.
Yeah.
More cheese, less whiskers, I think is his podcast. And he has 214 episodes, and they're all strategy sessions, right? And now I know Frank Kern started doing the same thing, which is really funny because if you listen to his last episode, he is looking for something on the computer and he's talking shit about someone that they both know. And I'm like, and that's in the podcast, man? Come on. So, what is that a new trend? Is that something that people have been doing and I haven't noticed? Is that something that you recommend that, like, just bring it in and unedit it and just put it out there?
You open my eyes to this, especially as regards to the jackpot moments. And I think it's a great idea. And the truth is, there's nothing wrong with doing sort of a live recording, right? And then editing it, not in a way. I mean, one of the things about editing, I think people have this idea that somehow editing is somehow like misleading or trickery or something like that. No, it's respecting your audience.
Right.
Doing it is thinning it out and making it more efficient so that your audience's time is used more efficiently. And
Right.
so, absolutely. I mean, so one of the things you asked about finding a purpose for the podcast, and then how do we get to that purpose? And do I sometimes tell people don't do a podcast?
Right.
No, I do work with people a lot is to tell them a podcast doesn't have to be an interview. A podcast could be a solo environment. A podcast could be a live coaching session. A podcast could be documentary style or narrative or dramatic. And there's actually an HBR podcast, Harvard Business Review, called Coaching Great Leaders or something like that. And they do live coaching sessions, but then they edit them down and they fill some of the pieces in with narration, so you can kind of get to the point a little bit quicker.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a great way to convey a message.
Yeah, and you're right. There's like so many ways. I remember my son and I were listening to science fiction story like episodes every time we drove from school, and I was like, and when it was over, I'm like, oh man, what else is out there exactly like that? Because that was so fantastic. You're right. It's like there's so many ways to express yourself. There's no one magic bullet. There,
Right.
but if you want to reach a wide audience, kind of like what you did with Spartan, you grew from zero
Yes.
to 30 million. What
Yeah.
is the journey? Can you describe the journey of actually getting to those? And then what happens when you get there? Like, okay, now you have a million listeners. Now what do you do?
So, I mean, have you seen that graphic where there's like, this is what people think success looks like, and there's like a line like this, and what success really looks like, and there's this swirling scribble. So, listen, we launched in 2015,
Mm-hmm.
and we have published over 600 episodes. We have tried a whole bunch of different things. I mean, a whole bunch of different things, from ways that we've formatted the podcast, from improving the interviews, just ability of our primary host, the guest choices, the way we record, the way we publish, the way we promote, all of these things. We've tried hundreds of different things. And so, it's a constant process. We literally recorded about 20 interviews with our first style that never published because we didn't get in the groove. We weren't happy with it, and then we changed the style.
Wait. This is interesting. So 20 episodes with a guest that you decided not to publish?
So we had a style. We were going to do. So the primary host is Joe DeSena. He's the founder and CEO of Spartan Race, which is now the world's largest endurance brand. And so it was going to be him and two other people and a guest, and it was going to be like a group conversation, and it was going to be in the barn on his farm in Vermont. And yeah, we shot about 20 like this with guests, and it just wasn't working yet.
So
It
what
just
do you tell the guest? Sorry, you sucked. We're not doing this.
Well, that's the hardest part, because I think the guests maybe thought it was a reflection on them, and even if you tell them that it wasn't them, they don't always believe that. But this is the hard truth. If you want to have a great show, this is something else that I think is important to think about. If you want to have a great show, your audience needs to be more important than your guest. So think about that. If your guest doesn't perform well, if they're not providing good entertainment or valuable information for your audience, are you going to worry more about hurting their feelings? Or are you going to be worried more about providing good quality for your listeners? And listen, this comes back to purpose. Because if your purpose is to network with your guests, then maybe you look at that conversation differently. But if your purpose has to do with the quality of your show, then you may have to have an uncomfortable situation with a guest. And look, here's a little trade secret. You can always throw yourself on the sword. You can always say, the recording didn't work. My camera person made a mistake. I don't know, the file got ruined. Like if you really want to walk that
way. It's the tech.
Yeah, exactly.
That happened to me live. I was in a conversation with a guy and I thought he was amazing. And I brought him on as a guest and he would just not answer the freaking question. And I'm like, but how specifically do you do that? And he would just like, all of,
just try to pitch his service instead of telling you how to do it.
like all general. I was like, oh my God. And like live, I'm like, are you gonna answer the question or what? Because
Oh,
you know,
gosh.
like exactly what you're saying. I'm like, we have people here, they're watching you, they're expecting
Yeah.
something, you know. And then I was like, guys, I'm like, you know, I'm gonna shut it down. I
Yeah. And the other side of that is, and this is how a great coach. Now, this is going to sound like a totally pompous because I just realized I'm giving an example saying I'm a great coach, but a good director, producer, coach, whatever, is willing to sometimes sacrifice themselves for you. So I've had a situation where one of my hosts is mid interview and they're just going totally off track and they really need a redirect, but they also don't need their confidence knocked down, especially in front of a guest. And I will say, oh, I'm really sorry, we had a problem with the recording. Can we start again? And then I'll say, as long as we're starting again, maybe we should change this or that. So there's a lot of, I don't want to say tricks, but you need a mix of humanity and empathy, but also being willing to say sort of the hard truths to be trustworthy. Like it's all those things together to really build a great show. And so, I have the good fortune that the primary host for Spartan Up, who's the founder and CEO of the company, is a busy guy, but he takes direction really well. And his ego is solid enough that he was comfortable with me giving direction live in front of a guest and saying like, hey, let's go down this way. How about if we work in this direction? And so, that's a big piece of it, is being really willing to listen and
right.
to take advice.
Yeah, yeah. I think we really lack listening skills. And Sabrina is here watching us on YouTube saying all of this is golden. Thank you, Sabrina. And we have some
Thank you.
questions here from people who are joining us. So if you have any questions about anything that you heard and you want to be part of the conversation, this is the time. Come here. Thatgeek.com/live. Right below the video, there's a button. Click the button. You will hop into Zoom with us and you can have all your podcasting, hosting, tech questions answered if we know the answer. If not, we'll send you something. Also, at the end of this, I'm going to show you how, if you're worried about the tech or if you're worried about, how to get started, all the stuff that is it number 4? That's not really that important, right?
Process, right?
All that stuff, Marion is going to give you that access for free. Again, it's right here. Thatgeek.com/live, right to the right of the video. You'll see her beautiful picture. You can click on that and get all the tech questions answered. But if you have deeper questions about your purpose, about why to do it, how to do it, all that stuff, hop on in right now. And we will let you in exactly like we're doing with Adil right now. So I'm going to unmute Adil. Hey, Adil, how are you?
I'm good. Yourself?
Pretty good. You are not Marianne. So good to see you again, buddy. How have you been?
It's been a long time. It's been nice seeing you back over here. By the way, this is a book she was mentioning.
Ah, the word art. Very nice.
Yeah.
Nice. So
Hmm.
go ahead. You had great questions to Marianne about podcasting.
So, I mean, I'm in the marketing field, and right now, uh, my questions are in regards to um, I see a lot of marketing agencies and people they're using podcast as part of a lead gen. I mean, it seems interesting, but at the same time, I don't know if there's if there's a value for the users in a sense that they getting their time worth in it, because they're not spending money in it, but they're spending their time. So I mean, in, me as a podcaster, as a marketer, putting the content out, is it good for user, or I should not do that till there's something interesting that needs to be said?
So here's the thing that I think a lot of people get wrong about using a podcast for lead gen. And it's like any kind of content marketing kind of a play. And that is, you have to make sure the content's good enough for it to work, right? Because if you just put app out there because you want to do it for lead gen, do you think it's going to work? In other words, are people going to listen to it and click through and go to your website? I mean, if it's hard enough, think about this. People whose sole goal is to build a podcast and build an audience, 50% of them are getting less than 125 listens per episode, right? So if you're putting out crap that is just, some lead gen based thing with your primary goal as that, without thinking about the value to the audience, it's not going to work. And so, number one, it can be a great source of lead gen, right? But you have to do a good job. You still have to do the same analysis that you would do with any kind of content marketing. And so you need to look at who's your audience, who are your potential customers, right? What are they interested in? What are their problems? You solve those problems, and how do you do it in a way that then can bring them into your system? And I think a mistake that a lot of people when they want to do kind of like a branded content or some kind of a lead gen podcast is they think that the podcast needs to serve the, and it does, but they're not willing to invest to build the podcast in the way they need to. And so it needs to be an organic whole. And so if you're not mentioning the podcast on your social media, in your emails, nobody's going to listen to the podcast. So if you make a circle where everything is serving each other and you are speaking to your customers, potential customers, it can work. It needs to be built to function, right?
Right.
Another great way to do this is to guest on podcasts, right? Because if you're building your own podcast, you've got to build your audience.
Right.
If you guest on someone else's podcast, you have direct access to their audience, which is already built. But you still need to have good information. If you just go and talk about how great you are, no one will invite you on, right? But if you have valuable information that relates to your product, then it can work.
Okay. So I mean, at my stage, you would recommend rather than starting a podcast, go and go do be a guest on a podcast where there's a content to be shared, but that it is just it's not content that makes you be able to do podcasts on a weekly basis, because there's a certain kind of commitment that's required for that if you're doing the podcast yourself. So I mean, instead of sharing being there and putting out not a good content, if you have a good content, just and it's not of a bigger quantity, just do the guest posts.
So can you tell me a little bit more? I mean, is there something that you think would be interesting that you have expertise on that you or your, a representative of the company could talk about?
So I mean, like I for example, like I provide SEO service or website building. So I mean, I can give some examples of like what are the good design principles, or like what kind of things that go into the SEO. But like there's not that. I mean, I think for me at this stage, I don't have that much to talk about. I can do it, but like to talk about it's going to be a totally different ball game. So that's where I want to find out what should be the best plan of action.
Yeah, and I think one thing that you can do is you can just sit down with a piece of paper and think about, if I were to start a podcast, can I just, sitting down on a piece of paper, think of 30 topics that I could talk about? I think a lot of people are super interested in SEO, and it's definitely something that they have lots of questions about. And, if you're comfortable speaking about it in a format like Ifat spoke about, like live sessions with clients could be really interesting. But if you're somebody, if you sit down with that piece of paper and you can't think of enough subjects, maybe you're not ready to speak about it. And I can tell you that practicing, even in coming up with topics, the more you guest on, or the more you record videos and on your LinkedIn or your Instagram, the more you sort of start to get your message clear. And so even if you are guesting on being interviewed, it kind of helps you to hone your message. You might start with conversations if you're not ready for podcasts. Literally just record a conversation with a friend and say, can you ask me about what I do? And as you answer those questions, you start to hear what they respond to, what they're excited about, what they're curious about. And that helps you kind of frame the conversation and figure out how to present it in a clear way, whether you are guesting or whether you're hosting.
One of the important things that you said, and that might help you, Adil, is that testing, right? Marianne did 20 episodes and then realized this is not what we want, right? So it was practice and testing. And then you go like, okay, let me change this or that. But this is the secret of all success in marketing. One word. Actually, I'll give you two words. One, nobody knows anything, right? It's all a trial and error. What worked yesterday might not work today. What worked with this audience might not work with that audience. Something changed politically. Now people don't believe you. Now this happened. You don't know. Nobody knows. Nobody knows. That's why when you go and hire a Facebook ad agency, they'll be like, we'll set it up and we'll test. That's why when you do a funnel, you set it up and you test. That's why when you do a podcast, you set it up, you record it, you might release it into the wild and test it, or you might listen to it and go like, not what I expected, let's change directions. That happens all the time. So the number one thing that if you take from all of it is testing. If you want to shorten the time of the testing, then you can work with someone like Marianne who has years of experience and be like, yeah, we try this, we try this, we try this, we try this didn't work, that changed, how about we try this and this for you, because we already went down the checklist. And that accelerates your progress, but you're still testing. So testing is always going to be part of the mix, right? Nothing is, and we're human. Things change all the time, right? You might wake up in the morning and go like, you know what? I thought I want to do solo, but now I want to interview. You know what? I thought I wanted to interview. I don't like talking to people. I want to do my own thing, right? You can change it as much as you want. We got two more questions before we have Marianne. How are you doing on time? I know we got like 7 minutes.
I'm okay. I've got a couple of minutes. I love answering real questions. I wanted to add one thing to the testing. Yep. And this is one of my one of the things I'm passionate about is yes, testing. Here's the thing about data that's really important to remember. Data cannot predict innovation. So if you want to try something new, there's no data yet. And so don't be afraid to try something new and then measure it, right? It's so tempting to say, oh, well, this is proven, and only use the proven things. You've got to try new things to get the data. So I would just add that.
And that's like my drop. Brilliant. It's great. I'm like, we can finish right here. So two questions. Jason is going to come in. And Zabrinia, I'm reading your comment on YouTube. We'll answer that right after Jason. So Jason, hello, buddy. How are you?
Hello. Man, I loved your episode with Ifat that I listened to on your show, and Mike Koenig's. I listened to his too. I'm a big fan of his. Man, he gave everything on that episode. That was awesome.
Yay, so you get listeners, Marianne.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I'm sorry. I was trying to patiently listen to your question, but yeah, Mike Koenig's so generous and really brilliant, right? That whole idea of being a category of one, right?
Yeah, for sure. I just wanted to, hear your insights a little bit on the promotion side of it. I concentrate way more on, producing content and getting it out there. And I've found on several shows that I've done is sort of just I get into that pattern of, well, sure, I make a promo clip, kick it out on social, and then, all right, I guess on to the next one. Is there anything you kind of do with your content to sort of build that audience a little more purposefully?
Yeah, the hard part is when you put it on your own social, you're still only speaking to your existing audience, right? How do you break out beyond the audience that you already have? And so there's a couple of things. One of the kind of simplest and least expensive is, again, guesting, right? And so if you want to be a guest on someone else's podcast, you're exposing yourself to their audience. And so if you can find people with overlapping audiences, that can be a really good way. Another related way, working with promoting within the podcast ecosystem is usually pretty efficient because it saves that step of, you don't have to introduce people to podcasting. So another kind of inexpensive way is to do like promo swaps with other podcasts that are in the same genre. Don't think about them as competitors. The closer they are to you, the more audience overlap you're going to have. And most, there is data that people who listen to podcasts listen to between 5 and 8 different podcasts in a week. That is, different, not episodes, but actual different podcasts. And so you want to be one of those 8. But so no reason that if you are the crocheting podcast and they're the knitting podcast, do a little cross promotion. So sometimes you can do promo swaps. You can also buy ads on other podcasts. If you look at the most successful, biggest podcasts, that is something they're doing. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with Jordan Harbinger. He's built a big podcast. And one of the ways he did that was he bought ad time on big, successful, like NPR style podcasts that had huge audiences. So he paid to have a host read ad on those, right? So the host of that show at the end of the show is saying, if you like this kind of information, if you like guests like so-and-so and so-and-so and conversations about this, maybe you'll listen to this podcast. So there are ways within the podcasting kind of ecosystem that you can do paid and free promotion. But again, yes, do social media. And here's a little kind of nugget about the social media that I've heard from a lot of podcasters in the higher level. Remember this, there is no click-through trail on social media and podcasting. So if you listen to podcasts, right? If I see on Instagram, my favorite podcast has a new episode, what am I going to do? That after
my app
the next day when I go for my run or I'm in the gym or I'm on my commute, I open up the app and I play it. So there's no click trail, there's no like, there's no comment or engagement. And so a social media team that's measuring KPIs strictly on engagement on the social post is going to say, why are we doing this? It's a waste of time. But what you and I know, because we listen to podcasts, is that that's not true. Right. So that's something to keep in mind when you're thinking about how your social media is performing.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Yeah, great question.
And our last one. Thank you, Jason. That was fantastic. And I love what you just said, because we often, get discouraged by the low numbers on social media. I know my own mentor has been sharing podcasts. He goes like, I'm just going to do one every day for a month, just for me. Doesn't matter what happens. And when you look at his social media stats, you're like, nobody cares. He got 5 high-paying clients from it, because they're going like, oh my God, this is so cool. And then they reach out privately and they say like, man, that episode really hit the spot. And then he follows up with the conversation. Yeah, so how's it going with you? Blah, blah, blah. Get a client, right? So social media can be very misleading. It's the conversations that we're having with people that actually make or break things. So,
and that's the other piece of testing, right? Ifat, is like, test, but make sure you're testing the right things.
I know, right? And the last question from Sabrina is, would you recommend having a team at the beginning or bootstrapping it until you gain some traction?
So, I can laugh about this, but the answer to everything is it depends, right? It depends. But there is a lot of value to having a team, especially if you are not a trained or experienced podcast editor. I recommend getting an editor. There are so many great editors out there. The cost is reasonable. Being an editor is a deep skill. It's like learning how to write. It's not something that you, unless you love it, you're not going to invest the time to be great at it. So I would say you probably want to get an editor, again, unless that's something that you're into. If you love editing, please learn how, but otherwise, hire an editor. There are a lot of kind of steps that have to be done to make a podcast, even an interview podcast. You have to research your guests, plan your questions, schedule the interviews, record them, write your show notes, do the edit. So again, depending on how much time you want to put in, you may want to launch with a team. I say it depends because it depends on your budget, it depends on your goals, it depends on all those other things.
Right. It goes back to, there's no magic bullet. There's
No magic pill.
no magic pill. Is there no magic bullet? There's no magic bullet. There's no silver bullet. There's no
Silver bullet. I don't
there's no
know.
silver
I don't
bullet.
think
There's
a
no
silver bullet's
golden
good.
spoon. There's no magic pill. How about that?
Yeah, I don't
How
think
about
a silver bullet is a good thing. I think that's like what kills vampires. I don't know. But
oh,
the magic, there's definitely not a magic pill.
no magic pill. Um, but the silver lining is how's that?
Yes.
the,
Yes.
the
Very
silver
good.
lining is that because there's no one solution that fits all, right? One ring to rule them all. There's no one way to do things. That gives you freedom, right? And that should make you feel like actually breathe in relief because you can't mess it up, right? There's it's your podcast, it's your voice, it's how you want to do it. That's how it's going to be unique. That's how you're going to attract people. And you can't mess it up. If you don't like it, the first 20 episodes will never be heard, right? Like it's fine. So the most important thing is action. Take the first step. What do you say? Take the first step in faith. I'm like all about like sentences today. Take the first step in faith, and the staircase will appear.
Well, and something about podcasts, right, is that the thing that most people are worried about is growing the audience,
Right.
but you're brand new and you don't already have a following, that's the benefit too, because as you get better, your audience grows.
Right.
And if we're on day one, you had 1,000 listeners, you might not be ready. So, grow with your audience. That's an option. It all depends. Like if you're an established brand, yeah, maybe don't publish those first 20. But if you're new and you have no following, go ahead and put them out there and let the public see as you grow. It all depends.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's no one size fits all. That's what I wanted to say. There's no magic bullet. But there is a path, right? If you want to succeed, follow those who have walked before you. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. There is a path. And if you want that path, you can get it right here on thatgeek.com/live. What you'll get is podcasting 101, the nuts and bolts, and you'll get some access to Marianne if you have any other questions or anything like that. The email is right there. Her email is right there. You can contact her. You can find her online. Everything you need. The one thing that you have to decide is take the first step. You want to do a podcast? That's a decision. Follow the 4 P's, right? Say them again.
Five
Purpose.
P's. Five
Five
P's.
P's.
Which are purpose, point of view, process, practice, promote.
Promoting. Don't forget promote.
And you can do it again.
Rinse, repeat. Rinse, repeat.
Right. Yeah.
Rinse, repeat.
Mhm.
So, Marion, where can they find you?
So madmotion.com is my website. Everything is there. And I set up a specific page today for Ifat because I love her show. I love what she does. And that's madmotion.com/geek. And I have specific information and some free stuff there. But if you want to go to madmotion.com, poke around, find all kinds of stuff, and you can find my social media there. I'm active on LinkedIn. I'm active on Instagram. If you message me on either, just mention Ifat, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
There you go. Relationships that build other relationships. Thank you so much for being here. I can talk with you for hours about all kinds of stuff. I wish you were my neighbor. So much more fun. But thank you for being here. Go check out her podcast and go check her out on social and basically model what people who have been through this have been doing. Then you can save yourself some time in the testing. Definitely get the course. It's completely free. If you want to know mics, tech, all that jazz, it's right there. And the replay of this episode will be right here if you want to hear it again. So thank you so much for coming. Have a fantastic Thursday. It's Father's Day this Sunday. So enjoy your fathers and your families. And we'll see you in another episode of I'm That Geek. Thanks, Marion.
Thank you so much. Great job, Ifat. I loved it.